Morning, Coach.
Good morning.
Good to see y'all. Good to be here. How y'all doing?
All things considered, very well.
Everything lined up?
It's getting there.
Not easy, is it?
Now,
Was the VA helpful?
no. We went to the as far as I know, the burial and everything's being taken care of. The local VA went in there, like, told them to stop sending payments and cancel all of his appointments. So we went through all of that, but it's not all.
Was the funeral home helpful?
Yes.
Good. Good.
I know.
Good morning, Sarah. I don't have high hopes, but I do have hopes. It's Nathan, the son of man.
Oh, good.
Good morning. Mark.
Thank you.
Might freak out and see that like I did. Y'all have a eventful trip, or y'all tomorrow?
They moved the service back to Tuesday,
Oh,
so
okay.
we're just gonna go tomorrow. Save some money on kenneling and a little bit extra time to get
I was
ready.
thinking it was, I guess I wasn't expecting to see y'all this morning.
Yeah, we were gonna leave yesterday when it was for Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, since they moved it back, we pushed the trip back.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry we're running just about 5 minutes late here. Some days you get here, you turn the computer on and everything works just exactly the way it's supposed to. This morning, since I was kind of pushing the clock a little bit, turn it on and it freezes. It means nothing moves, so you got to reboot it, and then sometimes it does that twice. You got to reboot it a third time. So it's like, come on now, cooperate this morning. But I was telling Robert, it's been a fairly busy week this past week. In fact, I can't remember now all that, but I will say that we've got the security system fixed, repaired, or whatever, and we had the painter come over and take a look at painting the lobby or the foyer and the kitchen and the side hallways. And I think we're going to do look at the doors and some ceiling areas. And he gave us a bid of $6,800, which I like to faint when he said that. I thought, ooh, now that's a chunk of money. And I thought, well, maybe I need to undertake this project like I had planned to do once before, because it'll be done a lot less than that. But that's a tremendous amount of money. And several other things have been taking place. But anyway, we're glad to have Mark and the family here. As I said, we're expecting them, but I guess their timetable's been moved up.
It's been in flux, so.
Yeah, okay, so y'all leaving this evening or tomorrow?
Tomorrow,
No.
mid-morning.
Okay, so they'll be leaving tomorrow at mid-morning. And what else is going on this morning that we need to take note of? We're approaching daylight savings time before long, so I don't know if I'm looking forward to that or not. It'll be here whether we want it or not. Well, this morning, Robert's going to be bringing our morning sermon and also this evening. And so so busy this week, I wasn't even thinking about who's going to do the Bible study this morning. And what was it, Wednesday or Thursday? I got a text Robert said, I thought, oops, yeah, I guess I better plan on doing that since you're preaching both times. So we're going to be looking at Psalm 139 this morning. I had actually prepared to do a lesson on this way back, and thought, well, this would be a good time to finally, do it. I actually have used this in a sermon I did a few years back. Excuse me. Get my Bible tablet out here. Psalm 139 is probably one of the most revered Psalms in the Bible. And we'll look at why that is so. So let me go to Psalm 139 here on my pad. Maybe already there yet. I'm there. But to kind of begin with a couple of stories regarding this particular psalm. There was a Bible college student that he was, really concerned about whether or not he could grasp the meaning of certain passages in the Bible. And so he went to his instructor, and instructor looked at him and said, "Young man, allow me to give you this word of advice. Give the Lord credit for knowing things you don't understand. God knows everything." Which reminds me is that I don't know everything. I got into our study Wednesday night, and I don't know, I just had my brain was the synapses, nerves, and that wasn't. And we got into a discussion about the judgment, and I kind of got twisted, but I think we finally ended up getting it correct. And I did forward to y'all from Wayne Jackson a clarification on that, so I didn't have anybody totally confused. But we should be reminded, as Isaiah told us in Isaiah 55, verses 8 through 9. And I love this verse because it makes me feel better about how dumb I feel sometimes. Isaiah said, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts." That is, he's speaking for God. "Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." There's, and I'll end on this. I love looking at these little Bible stories that, I've got a site where you can go to get supporting, stories and so forth about particular topics. But this is in regards to a astronomer, well-known astronomer from Princeton University. His name was Henry Norris Russell, and he had done a lecture regarding the Milky Way, which, we're part of the Milky Way galaxy and so forth. And so a woman came up to him and asked a question. He says, "Professor," says, "seeing that the universe is so entirely big and Earth is such a tiny, tiny speck in the universe," she says, "does God really pay attention to us?" Referring to the fact that we're so small in such a vast universe. And he looked at her and he said, "Ma'am, that depends entirely on how big a God you believe in." And sometimes that's the way we go. But anyway, Psalm 139 is written in stanzas of 6 verses each. And we're going to look at those, but the interesting thing about these stanzas is this is where we get 3 very important characteristics of God. One is omniscience, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail. The second is omnipresence, and the third is the omnipotence of God. So let's look at the first 6 verses of Psalm 139, and we're going to look at the omniscience regarding God. And I'm reading from the New King James Version. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought from afar. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. So here in these first 6 verses describes what we would refer to. Of course, these words are not in the Bible, but it certainly applies, and that is the omnipresence of God. Now, what do we mean by omnipresent? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Omnipresence. What does that mean?
Present everywhere.
He's everywhere at all times. Having complete, unlimited knowledge, awareness, understanding, perceiving all things. That there's nothing hidden from God. Not the darkness can hide anything from him, anything. Number 1, God knows our activities, the first 3 verses. Anybody want to comment that? He knows our activities. As it says, you've searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought from afar. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. You know when I get up. You know when I sit down. That is almost more than, a human can comprehend. How could that be when you consider every individual person who lives or has ever lived, that he's aware of each and every person? Well, it's like the astronomer told the lady, "Madam, it's how big a God, do you worship? How big a God do you think he is?" And he is big enough and has complete, unlimited knowledge that he's aware of that. Robert?
Does it say, you know my thoughts from afar? Is that what you read?
Yes, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off.
Sometimes we can say, well, I know what he would do, or I know what he's thinking because I've been with him so much. I'm around him, I can predict. This is God knowing, and in our vernacular, from afar. I don't have to be right there I know. Sort of like the vision we give small children of Santa Claus. He may be in the North Pole, but he knows when you're good, when you're bad, when you're asleep, when you're awake.
Right. Yeah, they kind of get that mixed up there a little bit. But, he sums up in 139:6 that you can comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. It's too wonderful for me to even comprehend. And laid thy hand upon me. I'm skipping to another verse here. There is something very personal about what he's saying, because this is referred to each and every individual. And 139:6, when what is written here is understood of merely a single individual. That is, he's aware of each and every individual. But the commentator, Burton Crofton, makes an interesting point. He says, when you multiply that times all the people who have ever lived on the earth, who is living on the earth, or ever will live on the earth, the vastness of that is beyond what we can even comprehend. But what value is it for us to know that? If we understand and we accept these verses, that God is omnipresent, what does that mean for us as individuals today?
It means that we're never alone, that we're never in a struggle, that God's not there with us. It means that we can always take comfort in the fact that we are God's and He does care. And when it seems like no one else does, we can find comfort in the fact that God does care.
I'll never leave you nor forsake you. There's a song in our songbook that we've sung a number of times. There's an all-seeing eye watching you. Mark, you have.
If you consider what is being presented here, God the Creator, us the creation, and there's such a relationship between the creation and the Creator. The Creator knows His creation so perfectly and completely. That is comforting or scary all at the same time. He has made us. He understands us.
Knows us better than we could ever know ourselves. Knows our thoughts from afar. Now, another part of that is that if I am conscious of that, then I should be guarding my life in a way that, knowing that I'm going to be held accountable for all the deeds I've done in my body. I did a sermon not too long ago that we're going to be held accountable for every idle word. It's like, ooh, Lord, you missed that one, didn't you? You didn't hear that. Well, yes, He did. He didn't only hear it, He knew it before I said it. And so it's a very comforting thing, as Betty said, to know that He is aware of us wherever, whether we're in prison, whether we're on our deathbed, whether we are on the top of the world, whatever it may be. He is there and aware of everything. Robert?
And the opposite is true. When we want Him to be there, He's there. When we don't want Him to be there, He's there.
Exactly. And that's the thing, too, we should remember. Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So we are a product of our thinking. And God is aware of our thinking. Our speaking reveals what's in our heart. Luke 6:45 says, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so, God is very much aware of what is in our heart, what is on our tongue, what is even in our thoughts. And it's not just humbling, but it's one of those things that almost brings you to your knees when you realize that God is aware of some of the worst thoughts I've ever had in my heart and in my mind. And still do. Especially if I'm watching the news. It just, followed this week of this young lady, a nursing student, out running in a very popular area, the University of Georgia. She was part of the University of Georgia nursing school out of Augusta. She was there jogging, place she's jogged before, and she is molested by, should I say this, an illegal alien and is brutally murdered. And turn to find out this person's already had a record of other abuses. And so he's out roaming free in this young woman who's just getting her life started, and she is murdered. And it's like, when I hear things like that, and particularly things involving small children, such as a couple who are being charged with murder because their 6-month-old child died of fentanyl poisoning from their negligence and their use. And it's like, God, how? But, you know, God sees us with totally different eyes. Your ways are not my ways. And that's what I have to remember. God, you, vengeance is mine, thus says the Lord. But I have to be careful sometimes because I'm thinking about things that maybe I shouldn't. But too wonderful for me in 139:6. And that's a good way to describe it. Now, let's go on to the next 6 verses. And in these next 6 verses, omnipresence, whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in, some verses says Sheol, some says hell, but the meaning here is the grave. If I make my bed in the grave, which one day we all shall, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Now that is another wonderful verse that, you know, is beyond what we can possibly comprehend. You know, I think I got some of my terms here mixed up, beginning with the first one was supposed to be omniscience. The first one, I said omnipresent, I meant omniscience, that he knows everything, that he is everywhere at the same time, and his presence is continuous, you know, throughout. I'll get them confused again. Omniscience. Now, these beginning of verse 7, we look at the omnipresence, that is, being everywhere at the same time. Omniscience, which we actually just covered, means he's aware and knows everything that ever is, ever was, or ever will be. He's ever present as we go to omnipresence. Where can I go from your spirit? Being everywhere at the same time. God's presence is continuous throughout all of creation, though it may not be revealed in the same way at the same time to people everywhere. James chapter 4, verses 13 through 17, basically says that God knows our plans. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall leave and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. So, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I get away from the Spirit of God? God is a spirit. As we know, the rest of that, worshiping the Spirit in truth. But where can I flee from your presence? And this kind of a parallel line to the preceding one. But going back to the Garden of Eden, what happened after Eve and Adam violated the one rule God gave them, the one commandment He gave them? And God came out and says, "Where are y'all? Where you at?" Well, of course, He knew where they were, but what were they doing? They were trying to hide. I remember one time getting in trouble at school, and the principal had called my parents. Got home, and my mother did one of those things where she makes you go cut your switch, and if you don't get a good one, she'll go back and get a bigger one. She tore me up. And what I did is, me and my cousins who were visiting my grandmother, who lived next to the school, we went into the lunchroom through an open window and got ice cream out of the ice cream machine where they used to sell ice cream. Even though my cousins left money up there to pay for it. But that wasn't the point. We had broken into the school. I think I was 7th grade or something like that. Well, first I got to meet with the principal, and he described the law and all that. He was a very good man. And I had never been in trouble in school my entire life up to that point. But anyway, called my parents, told them what had happened. And I mean, my mother, I looked like one of the native Indians doing the war dance around the fire, going around in circles, yipping and yelling and hollering. And then I had to wait for my daddy to come home. And I went in one of the back rooms and hid up under my mother's, one of these old-timey sewing machine things. I got hid up under there. I don't know why I thought I wasn't going to be found or wasn't going to. In fact, Dad did. He'd go back there looking for me. He called for me. And when he called, I knew I better come. And we sat down in the living room, and he was sitting in a chair, kind of relaxed, sitting back like he wasn't concerned about a thing in the world. And then he says, go back there to my bedroom and get my belt. And I just sat there frozen. And he had let me sit there for several minutes, and he'd say it again. And this went on for seemed like for 5 or 6 hours. It may only been an hour, I don't know. But he sat there, just relaxed, and I sat there frozen, not wanting to go up and get that belt. And I didn't move. And this did go on pretty late. He finally said, well, let's go on to bed, and we'll tend to this tomorrow. You think I slept very well that night? For the next month, I think, I kept getting up thinking, is this today? Is this today? Is this today? And I think there was a discussion between he and my mother where she had basically told him that she had already punished me and so forth. So the final issue was he did not put his belt to me. But what he did is he went with me to the school. And I had to go to the principal and to the lady who was over the lunchroom, who happened to be the sister-in-law of the principal. And I had to apologize, and I had to pay again for the ice cream. My life of crime ended on that day. But anyway, God knows our plans. We cannot flee from His presence. And sometimes it's like mom and dads have eyes in the back of their heads, side of their heads, and everywhere else. But back in those days, in a small community, everybody had an eye on you, and everybody knew who you were. And I was the youngest of 10 kids, and I had all but 3 of my older brothers and sisters had gone to school at that same school and graduated, and there was only me and my sister out of 10 left. So they knew my whole family. Actually, my father had added on an addition to the principal's house, and so it was one of those deals. But where can I flee from your presence? Adam and Eve couldn't hide. Now, there's another story that in 1964 at the World's Fair that was being held in New York, the Moody Bible Institute, which I'm not recommending them, they do a lot of good things, but they got some areas, particularly on the premillennialism, that they still believe and support. But nevertheless, they had a presentation there, and it says, since God is everywhere simultaneously, He is still seeing everything that has ever happened in the whole universe, just as people can see the light of the constellation Andromeda, which began its journey to Earth 2 million light years ago. God's presence as an observer is not limited either by time or space. His presence is eternal regarding all events, past, present, and future. This was a big display they had outside of their, whatever you call it, that they all put up there. So, God doesn't miss anything. The wings of the morning. I love this. If I ascend to a heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning. One commentator says the opposites mentioned here, depth of the sea, wings of the morning, than the uttermost parts of the sea. That is, the latter, the uttermost parts of the sea, being a reference to the far western end of the Mediterranean. And I'm just going to go with that. And the wings of the morning from east to west. In other words, He occupies every space there is on planet Earth and beyond. And so there's some of the most poetic and beautiful lines in this psalm of any that's written. Thy hand shall lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. The bringing together in this verse of God's hand and His right hand attests to, according to the commentator, that this is David's authorship. I didn't go into this, I don't think it's necessary, but this psalm is attributed to David. But there have been some who have tried to argue, no, that it's not David, it's somebody else. But the general consensus is that this was David based on the language and what's said in this. And the last part of this, in verse 11, the darkness shall not overcome or overwhelm me. What is most evil, or most evil practices, when do they occur usually?
At nighttime.
At nighttime, you know. Of course, today it's like, doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. But still, even the Bible talks about, you know, those who do their deeds in the darkness because they think nobody's going to see them. You know, and now they dress up in this ninja-looking black clothing and hoods and masks and so forth because they're trying to be hidden from cameras. Because today, since 9/11, there are cameras just about everywhere. And so you have to be very careful. If you think nobody's watching you, you better think twice because your neighbor over there's got cameras and my neighbor does. It's like he knows everything and from a 180-degree view what's going on in our neighborhood. My wife says, maybe we need to put up cameras. I said, what for? Joe's got us covered over here perfectly. And he does. It's like, but there are cameras everywhere. But still people try to dress up or they try to hide in a way that they think nobody can see them. And maybe they can't, except for one person, that all-seeing eye. Betty, go ahead.
That includes our mind.
Do what?
That includes our minds.
Absolutely, yeah. We've already talked about He knows our thoughts from afar. Knows what we're thinking. He knows the words before they're formed on our lips. That's pretty scary. It's like, well, Lord, if you know that, if you know the thoughts of my mind and you know the words that are going to be formed on my lip, you know, can't you just kind of pinch me and say, don't say that? But we have freedom to do whatever we choose to do. God has given us that right, and there's some people that, you know, have a problem with that. If there's a God, why does He let this happen? Why does He let that happen? Because He has given us the freedom of will but there is an accounting. Tax time's coming up, April 15 is getting close. Should be getting our taxes returned from a high school basketball friend that does our taxes every year. But we have to give an accounting. And there are people who try to cheat and get around that in all sorts of ways. But in regard to our lives as Christians or as human beings in general, we all are going to have to give an account of the things done in the body. We read this in 2 Corinthians the other night about the judgment, that all are going to have to appear before the judgment to give an account of things done in the body. And so the darkness shall not overwhelm me. And despite the fact, people still try to hide in darkness and it doesn't work very well. And we can read more about this in Romans 13:12, Ephesians 5:11, but for sake of time, I'm not going to go there.
Charles?
Yes.
I also, reading that, I'm thinking about Jonah and going to Nineveh and destroy it. I mean, that he was supposed to do one thing, or God sent him to do to save Nineveh, and he goes on the ship and he tries to hide and he's sleeping and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what was his thought? How did he think that he could hide from the Almighty God?
Exactly.
So even today, you have people running away from whatever, trying to hide or trying to, thinking that, nobody's going to see them. Or, God isn't going to intervene, or, that, whatever.
But that shows you that a man's, we may have grown in terms of technology and other skills and things and so forth, but the mind and the heart of man has not changed. He's still looking for a way to hide from his evil ways or whatever it may be. And we still haven't learned, from Jonah or other cases where you're not going to hide from God. He knows where you are, He knows what you're thinking, and He knows what you're going to do before you do it. Now that gets into an area, with the Calvinists and everything, that they would almost take away the freedom of choice of man to make decisions. Right?
I think sometimes the problem is we don't think about hiding from God, we think about hiding from other folks.
Absolutely.
And we're not even smart enough to be thinking about, oh, God's watching too. We just worry about somebody seeing us.
Absolutely.
And if we were a little bit smarter, we'd realize whether man sees me or not is irrelevant.
That, I love it. Got subscribed to the History Channel. Every day you get what happened on this day in history and so on and so forth. And there are little short stories about various points of history. But one of the ones I've always admired, and one of the early founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, he was a unique person. But it was, when the Congress was meeting to try to form a constitution, and there's big, just like it is today, bickering, and one wanted this, one wanted that, and finally, and I'm paraphrasing this, Franklin, remember what he says to the Congress? That in such an undertaking as this, and he goes into detail of what a major thing in history is taking place in trying to form this nation, this Constitution. He called upon that we need to be approaching God in prayer in such a great endeavor before we continue in this process of trying to put together a Constitution. And oddly enough, if you want to use that word oddly, I don't think it was odd at all, that after that, and they began to have daily prayer, things began to come together. If only our leaders today, but today, again, one of these news things that upsets me when I hear it about a person who was invited to do the opening prayer in Congress or the legislature. And of course, he's invoking the name of Jesus and praying for the leaders in the way that the Bible teaches us. And a big group of people, and I won't say who they were, boldly objected to it. It wasn't inclusive of all other religions. And one of the persons that was even suggested, which is, you know what an oxymoron is, right? You know, it's two words that kind of contradict each other, like jumbo shrimp. One of the persons who was on their list was a person who was an avowed Satanist, was suggested that he do the opening prayer. Okay, who's he going to pray to? Thy great Lucifer? But this individual and the ones who invited were chastised, and even wrote this long, this letter of disagreement with having this man and invoke the name of Jesus, and he didn't really chastise Congress, but he called on God's oversight to provide the leadership that was needed to get this country through some of its worst conflicts it's been in a long time. And a whole group of people totally were offended by that. If folks in the world today, or in this country, if they had any concept of God's omniscience, His omnipresence, what a difference it would make in our culture, our country, and in the lives of every individual. And we're allowing people who are like this MS-13. One of the things that that I have heard about them is they disavow God. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. But if we could just simply understand and have some idea of exactly the power and the authority of God, what a difference it was made. God knows our beginning. Starting in verse 13, the next 6 verses. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Let me stop there just a second. The lowest parts of the earth is not mentioning some deep place under the surface of the earth. The reference here is to the mother's womb. It is a dark place there, but it is in the lower part, as others have translated this and understand this. He's not talking about some location in the lower earth like we're doing the Hobbit and all this type of stuff. He's talking about the mother's womb. That my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book they all were written. The days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I wake, I am still with you. So here we're going to the third attribute of God, the omnipotence. Omnipotence referring to what? What do we mean by omnipotence? Strength. Power. He is all powerful. There is nothing that God cannot do. Power originates and emanates with Him. I was reading
It also refers to
as well. So let's look at these verses here, and we'll try to close up because we're kind of running out of time here already. That is formed me in my mother's womb. What greater miracle is there than the conception and birth of a child? Get back on to you. What's recently happened in Alabama, Michelle, kind of relate to this?
I don't watch the news either because that makes me mad. So.
Do what?
I don't watch the news, so I don't have.
Well, this is what the Alabama law that just passed in Alabama. You know, one of the things today is in vitro fertilization, where, you know, families who cannot get pregnant on their own, they can farm the sperm and the egg from a mother, and basically they can be, that's what I'm looking for, fertilized in essentially a petri dish. And they're actually, as I understand, around the country, there are thousands of frozen embryos in various places where a family may have several to try to make sure that they have one good pregnancy. You know, something may go wrong. And so there are, y'all aware of that, right? There are places where they are frozen embryos where the sperm and the egg have been fertilized and they're in a frozen type condition. Alabama passed a law saying that those fertilized eggs, those embryos, were human beings. That they had the same protection as a child in the womb. Now that has created another layer of this debate about, you know, abortion and when does life begin and so on and so forth. And there are even some who support or pro-life or say, that might be going a little too far because, you know, the egg, it's not really until it's within the mother's womb. But anyway, that's another issue, and I don't want to get into that this morning. But anyway, he says the lowest parts of the earth, again, talking about the darkness of the mother's womb. And in the book, they were written even the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there were none of them. And, you know, again, it's appointed unto man once to die, and after that to judge. It's not necessarily saying that we have a specific number of days. Some people die young, some people die old. But some people have reached kind of up into the hundreds. I think sometime recently there was a man who died at 120, I believe. But now the octogenarians, as they call them, there are many people living to be over 100. But back in the Old Testament, remember, and I forget the name, the number and the verse where we read it, but it was in Genesis, I believe, when we went through when God set the length of man to how many years? Was it 125 or something like that? But anyway, our days are numbered, and that we're not going to live forever, regardless of how much science has come around, how much people try to do to try to find the fountain of youth, and all the different medical things that are being done today. But nevertheless, the days were fashioned for me, and as yet were none of them. That is, even before we were born, our days were already numbered. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am with you. Well, we're going to have to stop there. It's already gone a little bit over time here. And maybe some other time we'll get to finish those last few verses. But thank y'all for coming this morning. And sorry I tried to put this together in a little bit of a rush to be ready this morning. But thank y'all again. And Mark, glad y'all were able to be here this morning. And Hope y'all have a safe trip tomorrow. Hope everything goes well with that. All right, we will conclude the Bible study and be prepared to start worship here in just about 10 minutes. Good morning, everyone.